Hello, this is Bad Vibes. Today's stories all involve school or learning in some way. Whether it's creepy teachers, creepy students, camp, or even college, please hit that like button if you enjoy, and sit back and relax. I remember this event after reading a similar creepy story on here, and thought I'd post it. I went to school with this guy. We never dated or anything like that, just friends, but not overly close. I didn't see him for a few years after we got out of school, but we ran into each other when I was pregnant with my son. We hugged, talked for a while, and then we went our separate ways. Several years later, I was watching the evening news and I heard them say a familiar name. I immediately recognized the name of my old friend since it was fairly unusual. They said that he was arrested for killing his girlfriend. He apparently stalked her, but was able to get her to come to his apartment to get her belongings. He then abducted and shot her. He drove around with her body in his car for 4 days. I don't mean the body was in the trunk either. Her body was in the passenger seat, and he would talk to her and take her places, such as visiting her father's grave. I was able to find an article from 1991 in a newspaper. This happened quite a few years ago. I was doing a summer program at college out of state when I was in high school. Basically, they had high schoolers come from all over America and stay in dorms during the summer to take summer classes for 3 weeks to get a taste of the college experience. One of the dorms was reserved just for us, and it had boys on floors 2 through 4 and girls on floors 3 to 5, with college student proctors on every floor to supervise. Floor 1 was a lobby and security guard, where you entered the building. One night, my roommate and I were asleep in our room. We were all supposed to lock our doors, but us girls typically didn't because we like to shift rooms and sleep over with each other after lights out, so the entire floor was pretty much unlocked. I'm a super light sleeper, so when I heard the door open, it woke me up, but I couldn't see who was in the doorway with it being so dark. The person then quickly closed the door and left, which kind of felt weird, so I woke up my roommate and told them. We texted the proctor, then decided to fall back asleep. The next day we mentioned it, and a few other girls said the same thing happened to them. When the day security guard ran the footage, apparently the night security guard had peeked into all the unlocked female dorms, but only the females. He claimed that he was told by the dean that he could sleep in an empty room, but that was allegedly on floor 7, not the girl floors. He didn't come in, talk to anybody, or hurt anybody, but he also didn't open any of the male doors or the proctor's doors. Then, after making his weird rounds, he went to nap on the top floor. I don't know if he was fired or moved, but I did find this really creepy. I entered the student parking lot at my college campus. As I got out of my car, I see a man standing a few cars away. I start walking and this man says, "Hey, remember me?" I said, "No, I don't." With a big smile, he replied, "I remember you from high school. We were in Miss Smith's class." I never had a Miss Smith in high school, and I damn sure would have remembered this guy if he was in my class, since me and my classmates had been together for 4 years in high school. So I said, "No, sorry, I have to go." He then asked me what high school I went to. I told him, and he swore he knew me. Again, I said, "No, sorry, I don't recognize you." He then asked me for a ride to his class, and that it started at 9:15. My college classes started on the hour, 8 a.m., 9 a.m., etc. My inner warning lights were going off. I'm getting weirded out and say, "I'm sorry, I can't. I have to go to class." As I walked away, he said out loud, "I guess I can't pull the wool over your eyes." A week later, the college campus newsletter said a man robbed a student at knife point. The student had given him a ride, and the student had been asked the same questions by the man. Lurking on the subreddit has helped some memories resurface. This is the first experience I feel like sharing. I'm a 29-year-old female. At the age of 20, I was working to get my cosmetology license at a small town beauty school. It was a modest school in a slightly rundown, dated building. The owner was a woman in her mid to late 60s whose husband, similar age, and son performed the property maintenance for the school. I didn't like being around the husband. I found him off-putting. I sensed an unpredictable vibe. He was quiet, but I always felt like he was leering at us girls. Rumors that he was always drunk. One day, he really gave me a reason not to like him. It happened during the end-of-day cleanup where students had to complete a list of chores. Right off the hallway with our lockers was a teeny break room that housed a creepy old closet that was used for storing cleaning supplies. The dimensions of this closet are important. 15 feet deep, but only as wide as its door, about 3 feet. Someone coming in to stand in the closet doorway while you were inside would have stopped you from exiting. A single shitty light hung near the door, so the further you went into the closet, the darker it got, approaching blackness. A vending machine is in front of the closet, obstructing its view, meaning that someone walking down the hallway cannot see the closet unless they actually come into the break room. I'm also 99% sure that the closet door couldn't be seen by the one camera in the break room. One day, I'm in the closet alone, looking for Swiffer pads or something. No one in the break room. Suddenly, someone appears in the closet doorway. It's the owner's husband. He steps into the closet, and I just stare. Now, I have little to no rapport with this man. It's doubtful he even knows my name. Also, I was 5'5", and about 100 pounds. Dude was old, but he was able-bodied and bigger than I. Without any kind of greeting that I can remember, he says in a low mumble, "I'll get you back there, pinned so tight," as he finishes his sentence with either, "You won't know what to do," or, "You wouldn't believe it." I can't remember verbatim. I'm trying to process his words while alarm bells are going off in my head. What did he just say? There's no one but us. We weren't even having a conversation, let alone a conversation that would match those words. I was so confused and nervous that I didn't say anything in response. I just pretend that everything is fine and that I'm focused in finding the Swiffer pads, that I didn't hear him. After a few moments, he steps back out of the doorway and leaves the break room. Relieved, I got the hell out of that closet. I couldn't believe he said that. There was no context that would have made those words make sense. Also, I don't think he got anything out of the closet, so why would he go in there? The cleaning tasks are assigned to the students. The whole thing was only a minute, but it was unsettling. I'm glad he didn't do anything worse. I quietly told a few girls, but I was scared to complain formally. I was timid, broke, with limited prospects in this town that I had just moved to. I didn't want trouble, I just wanted to graduate. Upon hearing my experience, another girl told me that she also had an unsettling encounter with him, where he stated that it had been a while since he had a little girl in the closet. I've survived worse situations, and I have since learned how to stand up for myself, but I regret letting him get away with intimidation. Should have told him to fuck off. The way my college was set up was basically 2 large hills, classroom, admin buildings, libraries, etc., and the dorms and cafeterias were on the top of the other. In the valley between the 2 hills was where the gyms and sports centers were located. I was studying engineering and would often stay late in one of the study rooms until 1 or 2 a.m. One night, I was alone walking back to my dorm around midnight, and I saw this guy standing at the top of the hill. No one else was around, and I was at the bottom of the hill. I had seen this guy on campus before, and he always gave me the creeps. His eyes looked really unhinged, and he often walked with jerky, almost frantic movements. Usually, I didn't think too much of it. I assumed he was a student and maybe had some physical or psychological issues. A few of my classmates said that he had severe OCD and would do quirky things while out and about, but none of them had the same look in their eyes as this guy. I wouldn't say it was an evil look, but his eyes always seemed untethered from reality. I always got the sense that he was seeing something a lot darker than the rest of us. On this particular night, as soon as I saw him, I got a bad case of the creeps. He was coming down from the hill straight towards me, so I casually crossed the street to the other side of the path, and he followed so that he would still be coming straight towards me. Again, I crossed the path, and he did the same. I was getting nervous when suddenly some guys came out of the soccer field at the bottom of the hill. The creepy guy noticed them, and when I moved out of the path, he didn't follow me. As I passed him, I noticed that he was staring at me, so I glared back at him to let him know not to fuck with me. After that night, I started walking a different route behind the tennis courts to avoid him. It was kind of risky since late at night, no one was ever around there, but I also began calling my parents on the nightly walks back home, and that helped too. I saw that guy a few more times on campus during days, but never caught him looking at me again. Hopefully my glare scared him off. I still have no idea if he was a student or just some weirdo hanging around looking to cause trouble, as there was another guy on campus who posed as a student, even though he was kicked out. He once cornered one of my girlfriends in the library trying to ask her out, and I think he was later arrested for refusing to leave campus. So maybe this guy was doing the same thing. I'm at a relatively small college campus in the Midwest. It's within the largest city and is about 4 blocks total. One evening, while my roommate was home, I chose to go on a walk. It was a Saturday night, about 6 p.m., around the beginning of February. If you're not familiar with the Midwest winters, that means it was pretty much pitch black out. I enjoyed wandering around the various buildings on campus, even the ones I really have no business being in, because after all, it's my tuition that helps fund them. Now, on a Saturday night, I was expecting most buildings on campus to be locked, so when I tugged on the music building's door handle, imagine my surprise when it easily swung open. The hallway lights were on, but I didn't see anyone. I chose to go up the first set of stairs I found, all the way to the 4th floor, which was also the top floor. The stairwell itself gave me the creeps. I took pictures of it because it reminded me of one of those eerie, liminal space photographs that tend to freak people out. When I got to the top floor, it was dead silent. I felt a bit like someone would pop out of nowhere and yell at me for being in there. I crept down the hall, listening for footsteps. The hallways in particular wasn't one that branched out. It had 2 stairways at each end of it and a single elevator. I had a gut feeling that it wasn't safe, and I had my pepper spray in my hand in case I did run into anything sketchy. Call me paranoid, but it was terrifying. When I got about halfway down the hall, I heard an instrument start playing. Now, I can't remember what it was, perhaps a bass instrument, maybe a piano. Either way, I knew that I wasn't alone, and I wanted to leave. The stairs left me uneasy. Looking at the second set that I hadn't gone up sent alarm bells ringing in my mind. Something stopped me from going down those stairs, so I waited for the elevator. It took probably a good 45 seconds to get to me, and when it did, it had a horror movie-like chime to it. It was slightly bigger than average too. It shook the entire way down, that awful chime ringing out as I passed each floor. When it finally reached the 1st floor, the doors opened. I saw a middle-aged man leaning against the opposite wall, staring right into the open doors, right at me. He was tall, not anything special. His eyes flickered to my hand, still gripping my pink pepper spray. Looking back, I'm glad I had it out already. I stepped out of the elevator and kind of nodded at him, before turning to walk to the doorway I entered from, the one furthest from the elevator. It's important to mention that there was also another entrance right next to the elevator. That one led to a much darker, less walked area of campus. I make my way down this hallway, glancing back at the man every few seconds. He He's staring after me, not moving. He doesn't get on the elevator. Once he notices me looking at him, he slowly turns and starts walking towards the door close to him, the ones I'm getting further and further away from. I continue walking and continue looking back at him. We reach our respective doors about the same time, which is odd considering how close he was to his in comparison to me with mine. Regardless, as soon as I put my hand on the door, I look back once more. The man has now turned towards me and began to jog towards me, sort of in the way runners do, not particularly fast, but enough that it would be easy for them to gain speed. Instincts kick in. Alarms are blaring in my head that I need to get to the library where it's safe and populated right now. I push through the 2 sets of doors and begin sprinting. I don't look behind me anymore. There's a set of small steps before the library and I fall up on those. One of my gloves falls to the bottom of the steps and I rush down to grab it before running once more. I end up safe in the library and trying to calm my racing heart. I also realized I had lost a single glove at the same point. I get my mom on the phone and talk really loudly to her and make my way back to the music building to find it dropped about 60 feet from the entrance. I grab it and book it back to my room. I don't know what this man's intentions were. Perhaps he was trying to scare me because he knew I would be freaked out. Maybe his intentions were dark. Regardless, it was one of the most terrifying things that's ever happened to me. So when I was younger, I was doing this boring schoolwork and stuff until we got an intruder alarm, which doesn't happen often. We don't even practice it because it's such an uncommon thing to happen. The guy proceeded to walk around the school grounds, even as far as our gym room, and I happened to see him as I was seated next to the window. He had a puffy black jacket and a baseball cap. It was all pretty terrifying considering a thing like this has never happened before. Later that day, I overheard the teachers talking about him and how when they searched him, they found a kitchen knife in his pocket. Luckily, no one got hurt, but this just freaked me the fuck out. So I'm in high school and I sit with a group of emo gay kids at lunch. A while ago, there was this one guy who would hang out with us. I didn't think much of him, skinny white emo kid, until one day he kept saying that he was black. He wasn't, he's completely Snow White. It was making slightly racist comments to the point where he pointed at someone and said, "Look, a monkey." That was when we exiled him from the group. Fast forward up to recently, he joined my ROTC class, which is basically military in high school. He makes dark comments all the time and dark jokes. Once there was a lockdown and we were really scared, and he was sad that he didn't get to die that day. Meanwhile, I was ready to give up my life to save people. He said he liked ROTC and wanted to join the army because of the blood and violence. I have also heard him make jokes about shooting up the school. He does this a lot and it makes me very uncomfortable. I talk to my friends and it turns out the other girls are uncomfortable as well. He keeps talking about death and dying and killing people. I need to talk to my flight leaders about him because I generally feel like he might do something. Edit. He has been reported to my flight leader, and I'm also going to tell my mom, who is a guidance counselor at another school. Update. I just reported him to the police. I will also file a report to my school about him. It's in the hands of the higher-ups now. Trigger warning for this story. I'm a 20-year-old female. I was 13 at the time that the story takes place. It was the summer between 7th and 8th grade, which would make it the year 2016. I just moved into a new city about an hour away from where I grew up. To help me make friends before the school year started, my mom signed me up for a day camp in the new town over the summer. At this camp, I actually did develop a small friend group, but the only one that matters to the story would be Jim, male, 14. I'm gonna be honest, Jim was always more flirty with me than I was comfortable with, and I expressed that several times, but I always tried to minimize confrontation when I did so. Hindsight is 20/20. I should have cut off the friendship when it was clear he wasn't respecting my boundaries. But damn it, I was the only kid, and all my new friends acted like it was normal. Well, one day the rest of my friend group wasn't there. One was sick, and the other two were siblings whose family had taken the day trip. Jim and I were hanging out alone in the gym. We were sitting off to the side talking, but the gym was full with other kids and counselors. He said he had a secret to tell me and asked me to lean in closer. As soon as I did, he grabbed me, pushed me down to the ground, and got on top of me. In front of the whole gym, he was trying to kiss me while trying to use the hand that wasn't holding me down to fiddle with the button of my pants. I yelled at him to stop, to get off of me. I yelled no, thrashed around, and made it as difficult for him as possible to do what he was attempting to do. But he wouldn't stop. None of the counselors gave it a second look. I thought that in a room full of people, no one was going to stop him, and I knew that if someone didn't, he was going to fully overpower me and follow through. I was trying to get him off of me when a group of 4 or 5 kids from a younger group who had previously been playing badminton saw what was going on and decided to take it into their own hands since no one else would help me. I want to stress to you guys that these kids were from 6 to 9 years old. None of them looked older than 8. But these kids brought their little rackets with them and rallied around me. I heard a little chorus of voices yelling, "Get off of her! Stop it, you big butthead!" And one prominent, she said no. While I watched 2 rackets slide between our faces, they were trying to pry his face off of my face. The other kids took their rackets and just went ham on Jim, hitting the crap out of him. At first, he was focused on his goal. They just swatted at them, hitting the kids back, and continued to try to focus himself on me. But those kids were not letting up, and the combination of me thrashing and the kids hitting him made it a lot harder than he thought it would be. So after about 5 minutes of this, Jim decided it simply wasn't worth it anymore, got off of me, and just walked away. I still think about this a lot. It was traumatic as hell for me. Not only that a friend of mine tried to do this to me, but that the adults in the room that were supposed to protect me completely ignored a blatant sexual assault attempt. It's sick to think that these young kids cared more about my autonomy than the adults. But at the same time, it gives me a little hope for the future to know that younger kids of this generation are taught to care about others in this way. Those kids would now be the age I was when it happened, and I wonder how they're all doing at this time. I wonder if they ever think about what they did that day. I hope they know how grateful I am. I can't say I'm glad that this happened by any means, but in a way, I'm grateful that it gave me an opportunity to see the next generation in action and boost my faith in humanity. Trigger warning for this story. My college was very safe. The worst thing that happened was crazy drunk frat boys getting the police called for mischief. It was your typical campus fitted with those blue boxes where you can call for an emergency. Now when I walk around campus, I often scroll through Reddit or Instagram. I know that's stupid, but don't judge me. I was a college student. Anyway, this particular night it was dark out, but only about 7 p.m. There were lots of other students walking around, and the campus was pretty well lit, yet for some reason, I didn't go on my phone this time. I just had this feeling that something was off. I couldn't place it, but in the back of my head, I felt like something bad was going to happen. The walk continued normally, and by the time I got back to my dorm, I began to laugh at myself. Now, these were apartment-style dorms that you entered through the outside via a pathway. The feeling from before returned, and this time I was hit by a sudden feeling of intense fear, much stronger than before. I looked around the common area and noticed a light coming from my room. Something told me not to investigate, but instead I muttered, "Seriously? I forgot it?" and went back outside. I felt a bit paranoid for the next few minutes, crouching down behind the window like a crazy person. I began to think I was just being weird when I heard footsteps. I slowly peeked into the window to see a man that I didn't know coming out of my room and pouring himself a glass of soda. He brought it back with him and disappeared again. I stayed there for what felt like forever until about an hour passed and I heard footsteps again. He was headed for the front door and I bolted to the stairwell. I climbed to the floor above and waited for a few minutes before returning. Sure enough, he was gone, and when I entered the dorm room, I no longer had that bad feeling. I checked that place thoroughly and found nothing out of the ordinary until I lay down in bed a few hours later and felt something weird under the covers. I jolted up and turned on the lights to find a few condoms wrapped in plastic. I'm not sure what would have happened, but I'm fairly certain someone was waiting there to rape me. I didn't recognize this man from class, but he definitely was about my age. I don't know how he knew me, but the thought that I could have been stalked without realizing it struck me hard. I never saw the man again, and I never got the same feeling on campus. Somehow, I subconsciously knew that something was wrong. I have no clue how, and maybe there's an explanation, but that bad feeling may have saved my life. I've read a ton of stories on the subreddit and finally decided to share my own encounter. I feel like maybe I should put a trigger warning for sexual assault and drug use. A little background info and context before I get into my story. I'm a 22-year-old female, but this story happened when I was 18. Firstly, a few days before I turned 16, when I was a sophomore in high school, I was sexually assaulted by a guy who was 17, a senior in high school. For this story, I'll call him Connor. He was expelled from school after that happened, and I occasionally saw him around town. He would just stare at me, and it terrified me. I had, and still kinda have, really bad PTSD from it. I was afraid he would kill me for telling someone. My friend told the police and he was arrested, and I've always feared his retaliation. Secondly, in my junior year of high school, there was this boy who I'll be calling Luke. Luke posted on Facebook that he was going to bring a knife to school and stab everyone in his path. He was caught before anything happened and expelled, and everyone at school referred to him as a gtown stabber. Gtown was the shortened version of our town name. Lastly, my best friend and I were very into drugs in high school. We smoked weed every day and would use harder things like cocaine, acid, or Molly whenever we partied. Okay, now to the story. It was my best friend's 18th birthday right at the start of senior year, so her and I decided we were going to rent a hotel room and throw a party. We invited pretty much everyone we knew and shared on social media that we had alcohol and a hotel room and to message us for details. Before everyone came, we decided to drop something called Sally. Think of a drug that makes you hallucinate, like acid or shrooms, but the chill that comes from weed and the euphoria that comes from Molly. People said Sally was Molly's cousin, and it was like a mix of Molly, weed, and shrooms. We had never done it before, and we were high as hell. My best friend had decided to drink too, and ended up puking a little bit, so she wasn't as high as I was. I was hallucinating like crazy, and just felt like I was on a whole nother planet. Eventually, a decent amount of people showed up. Some of them I knew, but some were friends of friends that I recognized but didn't know. As the night went on, pretty much everyone was intoxicated and decided they wanted to smoke weed. I felt like I was the highest I've ever been and didn't need to smoke, so I decided to stay in the room and enjoy the high and the hallucinations. After everyone cleared out, I half noticed one person whom I didn't know. They had decided to stay as well. I didn't pay him much attention as I was incredibly high. I know that seems redundant, but it was significant at the time of the story. So anyways, I'm sitting there and this guy strikes up a conversation with me. After a few minutes of casually chatting, he mentioned his best friend and said, "I'm pretty sure you know him. His name is Connor." I was about to shit my pants when he said that, because he clearly knew who I was, which meant that Connor had told him about me. I instantly thought that Connor had sent him to the party to get me, and that he didn't go out to smoke because he was waiting for his opportunity. I tried to act as casual as I could. I just said something like, "Yeah, I know him." He then said, "You know the gtown stabber?" and I hesitantly said, "Yes?" He then proceeded to pull a knife out of his pocket and told me that he was the gtown stabber while twirling a knife in his fingers. At this moment, I felt like he was going to kill me and get revenge for his best friend. I tried to act as casual and text my best friend telling her that everyone else needed to get back there ASAP and told her what happened. They came back in a few minutes, but it felt like an hour. I can't imagine what would have happened if they had not came back, and I have no idea why he would have told me he was best friends with the guy who sexually assaulted me, or the fact that he was a gtown stabber, but I know there was no good intentions behind it. He left shortly after everyone came back, and I never saw him again. This happened to me about 14 years ago when I was 17. I was in the University of California. I graduated high school early, so I started university early. I used to go to the local Starbucks by my campus in my free time to study because it was hard for me to focus at home. I remember this older guy used to come in a lot and just sit alone at the table, always facing me, with one small coffee, and he would just stare. It made me deeply uncomfortable, but I was too young to think about reporting it because I didn't really think there was anything to report. He was just staring, not approaching me or anything. In fact, I thought some of it was in my head. I began to notice that sometimes he would leave around the same time I did. With the Starbucks, the parking was mostly on the ground level of a free parking structure that was on the corner from the shop. It was usually super easy to get a spot right in front, so you could actually see your car from the street in the structure. I usually parked there, and I never felt particularly unsafe, except when I realized he was following me out. I began to note what his car looked like and where he would park. It would usually be a little away from me, and I would wait for him to leave before I went anywhere, because I didn't want him following me. One afternoon though, I was heading to my car and I noticed that he was parked right next to me. The passenger side of his car was on my driver's side, and it was very close. I didn't see him, but I remember just having this most awful feeling in the pit of my stomach when I realized he had parked so close. I rushed to get in my car, and it was at the moment that I shut my door that I realized that he had been following me and approaching the driver's side of my vehicle. He had gotten as far as my door when I quickly locked it, and thankfully I did it fast enough because he tried to open my door a second later. I immediately backed out of the spot and floored it out of the structure. I got caught at a red light outside the structure though, which gave this guy enough time to catch up with me in his car. I honestly don't know why I didn't call the cops at this moment. I remember trying to rationalize what was going on in my head and thinking maybe I was making a big deal out of nothing, even though the man literally tried to open my car door. I know, I'm stupid, but I was 17. If it were me at 31, you bet I would have driven straight to the nearest police station. Thankfully though, I was aware enough that I needed to lose him before I went home, so I turned into a series of residential streets to see if he would follow. He did. I just sped up and made a bunch of random turns until I was sure that I lost him. Then I drove home and never went back to that Starbucks again. I don't want to think about what would have happened had I not been quick enough to lock my door or lose him. This took place around 2005. I was going to my local college. I, female 24, was in the computer lab, and some guy around my age sat next to me and introduced himself. I got creepy vibes right away from him. I could tell that he was interested in me, but he was being extremely pushy about it. I told him I wasn't interested in that way. I never had class with him, but he seemed to figure out which class I was taking, and every time I got out of class, he would be standing outside the door waiting for me, or he'd be sitting in the cafeteria eating with some friends, and he would move to the seat next to mine and start talking to me. My friends started to notice that he would follow us around too. One day he asked me what my career plans were, but he said he joined a company and would be making a lot more money than staying around in anything they offered at the college. He said that this company was having their monthly meeting that evening and that I should come with him to go check it out. I was broke and struggling, so I foolishly agreed to it. He picked me up in the school parking lot and drove me. It ended up being a BS multi-level company that I didn't want any part of. At the end, we drove away, and he said that he wanted to take me to a nice restaurant. He was all dressed up with strong cologne. I said that I can't go, that I needed to get back right away. He started acting crazy and saying, "Why don't you just go out with me?" He started punching the wheel and screaming to himself that he was going to kill himself. I was terrified. I said, "Well, if you want to go out, you need to tell me ahead of time. I'm not dressed well, and I've got a big test to study for tomorrow, etc." He seemed to calm down and said, "Okay, we'll go out another time." But I was done, and I knew that I might have got hurt that night. I told my college counselor, and he was giving a strong warning to stay away from me. He ended up leaving the school, and I never saw him again. This happened to me when I was 8. Yes, 8. On the last day of school before the holidays. There's this kid in my class. We'll call him Dan. We didn't get along. Sometimes if I dropped my pens, he would stomp on them. Then one day, our class held a party. Since we were kids, this meant play Twister and run around with snacks. The parents were in another classroom. The teacher had left the classroom for a bit. Then I noticed some guys were playing in the huge pile of beanbags. Being a kid, and pretty naive, I asked if I could join. They said sure and explained the game. Basically, I was supposed to lay on the floor, and they were to put some on me. Then I would jump up and startle them. I took my place, and they started to heap the beanbags, and I mean all of them. It was super tight and claustrophobic, with no place to really move. By the time they were done, I was suddenly super nervous. It was dark, tight, and stuffy. I could hear my classmates talking and giggling, waiting for me to come up, but I never got the chance. Someone jumped on top of the beanbags. Dan, I would later learn from my friend Arya. Now, I was a really skinny kid and the complete opposite of strong, while Dan was way heavier than me and only added to the weight of the heavy bags. I was suffocating from his weight. I literally couldn't breathe. I was slapping at the beanbags and trying to find gaps with my fingers. Dan weighed the whole thing down, as you could imagine. Finally, I managed to make a small opening and stuck my nose through it, but the gap closed before I could take a breath. My chest hurt. I had to breathe now, but I couldn't. I tried to make another opening again, but it was really hard, so instead I screamed. I was scared, crushed, and horrified all at the same time. This sort of thing was unlike anything that had ever happened to me before. I finally realized the severity of my situation. Up until then, I was in complete denial, but my mindset switched completely when I realized I was actually suffocating, that if he prolonged this, I could die. So I made the quietest and most choked scream as I was suffocating, which means not much air. Obviously, no one heard, and no one seemed to realize that I was suffocating, despite my persistent slapping and kicking. My movements were getting slow. I felt myself slip from consciousness. It was a terrifying feeling, as I could feel myself slipping from consciousness, and there was nothing I could do but keep fighting. I had no breath left to scream. Finally, I managed to make that small gap. At the same time, my teacher finally came back and saw me, ran to me, and started yelling at Dan while throwing the beanbags off of me. The moment they were off, I gasped for air and bawled. Once I was done, my friend Arya came with me to confront his mom. We told her what happened, and she said, "Okay girls, I'll talk to him about it later. Sorry about that, Lily." Not shocked, not angry, she just stood there, and we left. I hope he's not done that again. What he did to me was an accident, but honestly, he probably felt me kicking and pounding the beanbags since he was sitting on top of them. He was even one of the people who heaped the beanbags on me. I had also made it very clear beforehand that no one was to sit on them or place heavy items on them. As I said, we were all about 8 or 9 at the time, so this was probably by accident. Maybe as we disliked each other, he wanted to prank me or scare me, because I didn't believe that he would intentionally want to suffocate me. Still, he should not have been playing those games. I do think he apologized later on, but still, what happened, happened, and taught me not to play dangerous games like that. He did not do anything like that again, at least to my knowledge. Still wonder why no one noticed I was in trouble. Also, wonder who fetched the teacher, or if he just came in on his own accord. So yeah, that's my story. Even to this day, I get nervous when my friends or siblings start messing with pillows. I can't say it has traumatized me, but it sure gave me one hell of a lesson and a good scare for sure. I met a guy in college and ran one lap with him. He asked me what my name was, and I told him. He was hitting on me, but I said no. Anyway, I was going through my emails a day later, and he sent me a schedule of when we will run together. I was shocked because to find my email in the college email system, he had to have gone through everyone who has a first name in the system. He would watch me so intensely when I ran or shot basketball at the rec center. It was so intense, people actually noticed and told me. He would hide behind equipment and stare. That part was a little funny to me at least. His hiding was terrible. He kept hitting on me in person and wouldn't take no for an answer. He grabbed me by my arm forcefully on one occasion, and another said that he was my boyfriend. Obviously not. It's funny because I told my best friend and she didn't think anything of it. But one day, my best friend texts me and says to come into the dining hall. I did. There's another girl. I found out that this guy has a restraining order placed against him by the entire girls' soccer team. The restraining order was because he would use the same tactics against them. There's more that happened, but I'll just stop here. I'm 19 years old and living far from home in a studio room. When I was in middle school, I remember taking sex ed class. This must have been 5th grade because we had to watch this infamous video where we had to learn about our bodies, our reproductive organs, and had to watch a full video of a woman giving birth. I remember asking a female friend of mine an inappropriate question regarding the video we had just watched, while walking in the hallway without realizing the vice principal was in earshot. He called me into his office to scold me until I explained that it was just a question revolving around what we had seen in class. He calmed down and then ended up chatting casually with me, a little too casually. Maybe in an attempt to seem cool and relatable, he explained to me he had a tattoo. I asked him what it was, and he showed me the tattoo of an artistic looking fish on his shoulder. Even back then, I thought the tattoo was corny as fuck, but it was fitting considering this guy was kinda dweeby. He then went on to tell me that the tattoo artist who tattooed him in New Hampshire went on to murder, dismember 2 women a year later and was sentenced to life in prison. I have no clue why he thought it would be appropriate to share this with a middle schooler, but I was absolutely shook by the story for the following week and never forgot it. Edit. This is completely unrelated, but I also remember him joking about how fat his wife was. This dude was a real stand-up faculty member and general human being. I had a physics teacher in 11th grade that was cool for the most part, but definitely flirty with girls. I remember during tests he would do weird things like look over my shoulder to see what I was writing, then take an item from my desk to mess with. Weird, but not alarming. One time, I can't remember exactly what he said, but it prompted me to throw a pen at him. I didn't mean for it to hit, but it did, right on his head. I felt bad and apologized profusely. I didn't get in trouble, but I guess it became one of the many jokes of the year. After I graduated high school, he messaged me on Facebook asking me if I wanted a job. I was in university at the time, focused on my studies, so I said no. He kept going, saying that it was a job at a massage parlor and it involved happy endings. I blocked him and didn't hear from him again. Anyways, now I don't feel so bad about the pen incident. Hey everyone, I've been a lurker for a while now, and I've always wanted to post because I have so many crazy stories, and this is surprisingly the least crazy out of everything I've been through. I'm now a 20-year-old female, but I was in 9th grade at the time of this story, probably around 14. We had a really weird teacher for bio. Everyone hated him. He was boring, mean, never smiled, quiet, and everyone dreaded his class. I've always had a loud personality, and I used to act out a lot. He was actually on the nicer side to me. Well, one day we came to school to see that he wasn't there and we had a substitute. This lasted a few days, but trust me, we didn't mind. After a while, I guess the parents started talking and word got around as to why he wasn't at our school anymore. Turns out, this man had a lot of child pornography on his computer. We didn't know the age range of the kids, but we know it's bad. He had a lot. He was paying for packages, and I'm almost positive he was trading with other pedos. Insanely freaked me out since I was one of the kids he was nicer to. I know for a fact I'm very beautiful, and I was then too. It's crazy to think about why he might have been nicer to me. Can you imagine what these little kids had to go through for this? How many kids are stolen from their homes or born into abuse? It really creeped me out, and no one saw this coming. When they raided his house, they also found a bunch of illegal guns. Hearing how much time this man got is gonna make your blood boil. He got 3 years and banned from working with children. Our justice system is so horrible. Can you imagine sitting in front of a judge explaining why you purchased so much child porn and only getting 3 years? That judge must have had serious issues as well. I mean, really shame on them. Illegal guns alone gets you 3 to 5 years, so it's insane that he only got 3 years. He could have faced up to 20. So I'm gonna start it off by saying I'm non-binary and assigned female at birth. I also really love trade works, as it makes me feel super manly. So stuff like working with heavy machinery, wood, or other forms of trades excite me. Today I started my masonry class that goes for 4 weeks, twice a week. Masonry, if you don't know, is really just brick block laying, working with mortar, and leading the different branches of work for this trade. I was super excited. Some of my friends were there, and it was great. We were working in a shop on small, incomplete walls, smearing mortar so that we could prepare for block laying. Cue creepy teacher. We have 2 teachers to make sure everyone could get the technique down and learn how to properly do the work. Their names were Anne and Tom. At first, I thought Tom was sort of funny, and he's well up in his years. To get my attention, he touched my arm the first time, and I was very uncomfortable, but just figured it would be a one-time thing. For context, being touched unexpectedly and by people I don't know seriously freaks me out to the point of panic attacks. I have no idea why. However, it was not the last time, as he soon came back, this time from behind me. He placed his hand on my shoulder, and I could feel how close he was. He said something about my technique in my ear, and to get me to step aside, put his hand on my waist. I had never had this experience with a teacher before, let alone one I hadn't even met. Shortly after it was lunch, I found the woman who had connected me to the class and explained that I needed her to tell him how deeply inappropriate and uncomfortable he made me. Long story short, it was passed to the boss's boss. I don't know exactly what was said, but I know that he was given some formal warning about touching students, especially without consent, and he wasn't allowed within a meter of me or my work. I should also mention, most people in the class are men, and he never touched them or got that close. Needless to say, it was one of the creepiest teachers I've ever met. The teacher I had a weird experience with on 2 different occasions wasn't exactly someone that I would consider consistently weird or off-putting. He was a 30-something-year-old man who graduated from the same high school that he taught at. I think he played sports for the school back then and was probably a generally well-liked dude when he was younger. He also had 2 brothers who played sports around the same time and were probably as popular during their own high school years. I had him as a Spanish teacher in 9th and 11th grade, and I remember many students that were in my class and his other classes found him hot or attractive. It was like the girls were just naturally drawn to his charm, and the dudes naturally respected him because he was cool or chill with the bros. Sometimes it seemed like the teacher was aware of the girls liking him and would joke around and flirt back with them. Ironically, he also always loved to mention his 2 babies in class as well as his wife. I think most people enjoyed the fact that it seemed like he generally wanted to form a relationship with his students and get to know them. A rare few people disliked him because they thought he was weird for doing that. One of the things that he was very particular about in class was making sure that his students only spoke Spanish and not English to help us practice our Spanish. If he heard you speaking in English, he would call you out for it. One day in 9th grade, I was standing in front of my friend's desk and saying something to her in English because I don't know the terms in Spanish. My back was facing the rest of the classroom, and all of a sudden, I felt someone grip my neck and squeeze it repeatedly, almost like a neck massage with one large hand. I was completely shocked and turned around to see that it was my teacher grabbing the back of my neck. He told me, in Spanish, somewhat aggressively, to speak Spanish please. And that was that. My friend, who was sitting in front of me and witnessed the whole thing, looked slightly horrified and confused, and we both exchanged what the fuck looks. Fast forward to 11th grade, when I had him again as a teacher. He did it again one day, when I was sitting in the corner with my friend, meaning that he definitely remembered doing it 2 years back and deliberately did it again 2 years later. It just never sat right with me because he seemed somewhat respectable, and I never thought that he would do something like that, which could have been interpreted pretty badly. Usually when I see him laying his hands on people, it's to pat their back or arm as encouragement, never something like grabbing their neck as a pretend threat. What made it even more disturbing was that sometimes my friends would joke that the reason he singled me out was because I reminded him of his wife. Not based on looks, but because one day in class he shared a story about meeting his wife and said that he fell in love with her pretty much immediately, but that she hated him at first, so he had to work hard to charm her. My friend said that because it might have seemed like I hated him, or maybe I just didn't flirt with him like everyone else. I had a gym teacher that made me feel very unsure about myself and creeped out. I was in 7th grade and I had lost a lot of weight over the summer. I had spent 6 years with the same kids in my old school and wanted to start 7th grade with a new look, so I was able to lose a lot of weight. This meant that I finally was able to move around and take part of gym class. Since I was now getting sweaty and in desperate need of a shower, I would take showers with the other girls in the locker room. Now, we girls used the same locker room all the time. There were about 6 different doors in and out of this building, including a private locker room for the gym teacher. But despite that, our male gym teacher would always walk through our locker room, just as us girls had taken off our clothes and stood naked either in the shower or by our clothes. Remember, we were in 7th grade in Sweden. We are all about 13 years old. The gym teacher would always say, "Oh, I'm so sorry," and would always walk through the room looking into the showers and quickly leave. This happened all the time. Eventually, us girls started to use the toilet where we could lock the door to simply use tissues to wipe our armpits and clean ourselves off without taking showers. And yes, we did tell the principal and some other adults. Nothing happened. Nobody cared. I just stopped taking part of gym class and quickly gained weight again. In 8th grade I moved and got a new gym teacher, another male, but he never did something like that. To my knowledge, my creepy teacher situation never escalated, but here's mine. I grew up in Mexico, but I'm American. My first language is Spanish, but my English is as good as my Spanish. In the 5th grade, this made me my English teacher's pet, as I was called by my classmates. He would often ask me not to do classwork and just help him with the class, usually pairing me to whoever he felt needed it. He always gave me perfect grades, often without even looking over my work. He always looked for reasons to talk to me, and my whole class resented the favoritism. Multiple times I asked him to just let me do my own schoolwork, and he just put his arm around my shoulder or a hand on my shoulder and would say, not to worry about it. Here comes the weird and creepy stuff. School trips, sitting with him or near him, Secret Santa. How convenient, he got my name and I got his. That year he gave me a wallet. I don't remember what I got him, or more like what my parents got him, but I remember that blue wallet. I remember him taking me aside to give it to me, because I don't want the other kids to make fun of you for getting a present from me. He was extremely interested if I liked it or not. He knew blue was my favorite color, and remembered I mentioned wanting a wallet. To my 5th grade brain, it weirded me out, but never really seemed like a dangerous situation. That was the first year for him working as a teacher at the school, and also his last. Don't know if he quit or he got fired. I have no personal experiences, but these are a couple stories from my school. It's a pretty small school, but all 3 buildings are connected: elementary, middle school, and high school. I had a 4th grade teacher who was kind of a jerk. Years later, he got into trouble for acting inappropriately with girls on his high school swim team. Apparently, he got drunk and assaulted one, or some, in a hotel room at an away meet. We also had a teacher I really liked. I'm not sure what he actually did for the school besides coaching the little kids soccer. Kids young enough to have boys and girls all on the same team. I thought he was really fun, and all the kids loved him. My dad was at my 4th grade graduation, and he asked me about this guy. He told me to stay away from him. He didn't like him, and he thought he was too handsy with the kids. Years later, he got busted for massive amounts of child porn. Now, same school, but my 6th grade English teacher. He was fun, really great teacher, and rarely had to yell at us. He was also a soccer coach for the modified boys team. Years after I had him as a teacher, he got into trouble for lying to parents about taking young players to soccer camps for the weekends, when he was actually just keeping the kids at his house, only one kid at a time. But I think it was just one boy in particular anyway. It was never disclosed what would happen at his house for the entire weekend, but that's obviously highly inappropriate, and he was fired.